Hi guys, welcome back. So this lesson and the preceding two lessons after this, we're going to be looking at African music. In particular, this lesson we're looking at African drumming. Now, obviously, this fits into our Rhythms of the World unit. We've looked at Calypso and Samba from South America. So the Samba was from Brazil, Calypso from Trinidad and Tobago, which is just off the coast of Venezuela. And over the next three lessons, we're moving continents and looking at the African continent in terms of music. Now, it's important to be really specific. Obviously, Africa is an enormous continent with many countries and many different cultures and walks of life, etc. So, for the purposes of the exam, we're not concerning ourselves with North Africa here. We're concerning ourselves with what we call sub-Saharan Africa. So, the Saharan Desert runs along the mid-north section of the African continent, and we're concerning ourselves with this bit underneath, and in particular Western Africa, or Western Cape. The reason why we don't concern ourselves with northern African countries in the exam is because the musical retentions are sort of encapsulated in a lot of the music of Israel and Palestine, which is just here. So we cover a lot of those instruments and retentions there. So sub-Saharan African music is what we're looking at, in particular Western African. Now it's important to remember that there's a considerable lack of written music in West African countries, cultures, in the history of it, and that is not because of a lack of sophistication. It is because music played a different role to what it did in Western cultures. So in Western cultures, it was more about well, it started with sort of religion and moved into entertainment. So music originated in the church and then moved on to be something that you would go to see in a concert hall. So it's very sort of formalized, and it wasn't for the masses. Whereas, especially drumming in West Africa was more wrapped up in the social constructs of society. So drummers were incredibly well respected, and rhythms, drumming patterns, ostinato patterns were wrapped up in the fabric of social life. So weddings, funerals, celebrations, meetings, even changes to the working day were often articulated with a particular drumming pattern, a particular rhythm. And all these rhythms were passed down through an oral tradition. So they were taught from one master to an apprentice, from master to apprentice, from master to apprentice, etc. And it wasn't written down. It was done through the concept of the master drummer holds all the information in order to protect the information, and they pass it down to an apprentice. And it's only through that sort of transition from master to apprentice that you're able to learn it, rather than it being written down somewhere and held in scrolls or books or whatever. They were also used to send messages from one part of one part of the society to another, and it's important to remember that obviously that these certain tribes and clans would span large distances, mainly because the economy is largely like agricultural. There's a lot of farming. It's quite nomadic. So it was important to have something, really loud and really obvious to be able to send messages. And because we were the drumming was used to send messages, the rhythms are really complex and they're really varied and they're really diverse. So we are going to look at how that works. Before we do, I want you to do the next section of the assignments on the assignment section, because it covers some questions about the information that I've just told you there. So once you finish that, move on to the next section and we'll look at some instrumentation. Thanks.